Okay, earn money and retire in style. And the subheading reads, discuss your strategy based on the links below. Okay, so this is a kind of strategy and that I want to share with you. And I think it's very important. This slide I think is very important. It says, in which country do you think that you could work, save, and invest the most money? In other words, you want to work in a country where you can save and invest the most money possible. Okay, and there's a link there that we'll go to in a second to find out what are the countries where you could work, save, and invest the most money. And the second half of the slide reads, after retirement, which country do you think you could have the best life in and why? And there's another link to that we'll go to in a second that examines the possible countries where you could possibly retire and have the best life in, best lifestyle. Okay, so let's start with what countries could you work in to make as much money as possible? Of course, you want to, if you're making a lot of money, you want to save it, invest it, okay, as much as you can, within reason, okay? I don't want you to torture yourself. I don't want you to starve yourself to death or torture yourself just to work, save, and invest. But depending on your income, because if you have a minimum income, it's very hard to save and invest if you're like a minimum wage. But if you have a reasonably good income, you want to hold down your costs as much as you can so you can save and invest as much as possible. Okay, that's probably what you want to do. Okay, so this is the list of countries by gross domestic product, nominal per capita. So nominal means dollars, okay, in dollar terms. The reason for this is that after World War II, the United States was the dominant power of the world, although we were being challenged by the Soviet Union and to a lesser degree by Communist China. There was a meeting called the Brentwood Agreement, or the Brentwood Agreement came out of this meeting in, I believe, New Jersey, where all the major countries met and agreed to peg their currency to the dollar. So, for example, let's say the yen would be 100 yen would equal $1, as an example. 20 pesos, Mexican pesos would equal $1. Whatever the case, for all the currencies, they agreed to peg their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar became the dominant currency in the world, as it is still today. Okay, so this is in dollar terms. Okay, how much in gross domestic product means the resources that a country produces divided by the number of people. Okay, so it gives you a rough estimate of how much in resources do people have in each country on average, right? Some more, some less, but roughly, it's a rough estimate, okay, of the quality of life that people might have in any given country, okay? And there's a good map here that has, it's in color. And you'll notice that the dark blue, or the blue here, are the rich countries. Their people are the per capita GDP is over $60,000 a year. And then this looks like, I don't know, also blue or maybe dark green, I'm not sure, 50 or 60,000. And so I would say the blue and green countries, I would say, are the rich countries. Even the light, well, and then this light green one, I think, is maybe in the middle, and the yellow one's in the middle level countries. And then I think the orange countries are kind of poor, and then the red countries are quite poor. And then the purple, I don't know what the heck this color is. Maroon, the maroon and brown countries are quite poor. Okay, not good. Okay, so let's look at this map and find out what's going on. At this point, okay, so here's the map of the world. Again, the blue countries are the rich, and the green countries are the rich countries. The light green countries, like this might be Saudi Arabia, are kind of in the middle, as are the, well, let's see, as are the what? As are the yellow countries, maybe. Okay, so anyway, and then the dark maroon or red countries are quite poor, I would say, you know. That I think would be a fair assessment. And the first thing we see in this map is that the rich countries tend to be in the north, with the exception of Australia and New Zealand. The rich countries tend to be the north: Canada, United States, Europe, South Korea, and Japan. This is maybe Singapore. I'm not sure. They tend to be in the north. Okay, with the exception, these two exceptions of Australia and New Zealand. And the poor countries tend to be in the south. Okay, you know, the red ones, the burgundy ones, they tend to be in poor and in the south. Okay, so what does this mean to you, right? Well, I think what it means is that if you're born in the southern hemisphere, right, in the southern part of the world, your best bet is to move north. Okay, now you could stick it out in one of these poor countries and try to duke it out with your competitors there, which are in the millions, number in the millions, and try to have some fantastic results. But since most people are average, 2/3 people of the world are average, your chances of doing fantastic are not good if you're working in one of these poor countries. Okay, and so the implication here is that if you happen to be born in one of these poor countries in the South, your best bet is to move north. Okay, and I realize that Donald Trump would hate me for saying that, but I think that's the truth. Okay, okie dokie. So we got that out of the way. Now let's find out which are the richest countries in the world. And the first thing that might surprise you that it's not the United States. Okay, and this is data from the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, and the World Bank. Okay, so these are very reputable organizations. Okay, they're, you know, they have very large budgets, and they have very good analysts who spend their day doing this type of research. So they should be quite good. Okay, and the data correlates pretty well. You know, the numbers are pretty close. They're not way off. Okay, they're pretty close. And what we find out, first of all, is the United States is not the richest country in the world. We're the most powerful country in the world, but the reason for that is because we have a very large population. We have the third largest population in the world after China and India, about 325 million people, with a high standard of living. So if you take 325 million people multiplied by $65,000 per year, it gives you an economy somewhere in the range of 20 to 22 trillion dollars, right? And if you invest a lot of that money in your military forces, it makes you a rather dominant force. Okay, so that's why that's why many people think we're the richest country in the world, but that's not true. That's not true. Okay, what you're going to find by looking at this table is that we have basically 4 super rich countries. Okay, 4 super rich countries, including Monaco, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and Bermuda. So let's talk about these 4 super rich countries. Okay, first of all, they have a per capita GDP that is over $115,000 per person per year. Okay. Okay, more than $150,000 per capita GDP per person per year. Okay, these are the 4 super rich countries in the world. So let's talk about this. Okay, the best country in the world, which is not really a country, it's really a city. It's a city-state. It's called Monaco. It's in Europe. It's kind of between France and Italy, you might say. And Monaco has wonderful weather, like we do here in California. And their per capita GDP is $190,000 per capita per year. Okay, almost $200,000 per person per year is their GDP. So clearly, that's the best country in the world. But to be fair, if you're living in a major world city like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, those cities have a per capita GDP very similar to Monaco. Okay, so if you go to Manhattan, you'll see people, you know, very high standard of living. If you go to Hong Kong, you'll see very high standard of living. You go to the Ginza district in Tokyo, you'll see very high standard of living, and so forth. Same in New York, San Francisco, the west side of Los Angeles, right? Bel Air, Westwood, Brentwood, century city, so forth. Okay, to be fair. Okay, so Monaco is considered a country, so I would say, be fair to say it's the richest country in the world. Then Liechtenstein, but Liechtenstein is kind of cold. So even though the per capita GDP is very high, that's not for me. I don't like cold weather. Same with Luxembourg. Per capita GDP in Luxembourg is very high, but it's also very cold. The summers are okay. Summers in Liechtenstein, Luxembourg are okay, but winter is horrible. Fall is cold. Spring is kind of cold. Okay. Bermuda is off the coast of Canada and the United States, a bit north of New York. And so it's also very cold. And it's an island. So it's going to be probably more cold in Luxembourg or Liechtenstein during the winter. And so that's not for me. Okay. I think in terms of countries, Monaco is probably the best country in the world. That's probably the best country. They have great weather like we do here in Southern California. And they have a very, very high standard of living. Okay, then we go to, next we have about 50 rich countries, roughly, okay? Starting with Switzerland, which is very cold. Ireland is very cold. Macau is kind of hot and sticky, which I don't like. Norway is very cold. And then finally we get to the United States. So the United States is ranked number 10. And the per capita GDP in the United States is about $65,000 per person per year. After taxes, that means that on average, well, with GDP of $65,000 a year, it gives you a rough estimate of the amount of resources that people have access to in the United States on a per capita basis. So this does not mean that people are making $65,000 a year in the United States on average, but it reflects the resources that we have access to, meaning the freeways, the streets, the lighting, the gutters, the public libraries, the county clinics, and everything combined, okay? Gives you a rough idea of the standard of living of people in the United States, okay? It's not what we're making as an average, okay? But still, the United States ranked number 10, about $65,000 a year per capita GDP, so it's quite good. It's quite good, okay? California, as you probably know, has done somewhat better than the United States on average. So before the pandemic, the per capita GDP in California was $71,000 per person per capita. So we're probably closer to Norway, okay? So I think today it'd be fair to say that California is probably roughly the 9th richest region in the world, a little bit better than the United States, okay? And then let's go through. So these countries are good to work in, okay? So the good news for you is you're in one of the richest countries, one of the richest regions in the world, which means that you should be able to make quite a bit of money, save quite a bit of money, invest quite a bit of money, and have a wonderful retirement or golden years. Okay, let's go to the rich countries. I'm not gonna pause on the ones that have bad weather, okay? Because I think very cold weather or hot, sticky weather reduces the quality of life. So I'm not interested in working or living in a cold country or a hot, sticky country. So I'm going to skip those. Okay, we have Iceland, Denmark, Singapore, Qatar. Australia could be good. Australia could be good. Some parts of Australia have very good weather. Greenland, Finland, San Marino. San Marino is pretty good. They have pretty good weather. Germany, Canada, Israel. Israel has a lot of problems. France is kind of cold. Japan can be quite cold. UAE, very hot. Puerto Rico has warm weather, but they have these horrible storms. Tends to be hot. See, okay, 36 is Italy. Italy has wonderful weather. Okay, like California, wonderful weather. And the per capita GDP in Italy is around $33,000 a year. Okay, so pretty good, pretty good. South Korea is cold. Taiwan, I think, is kind of hot and sticky. Kuwait is very hot. Then we get to number 43, which is Spain. Spain, the per capita GDP in Spain is around $29,000 a year. And the weather is wonderful. I've been to Italy, and Italy is a very beautiful country. Spain is a wonderful country. Wonderful weather, standard of living is very high. The people are very nice. If you Lunch is about $5, including a beer. Dinner is $5, including a beer, if you buy tapas. So you go to these little restaurants where they sell tapas, and tapas are kind of like small dishes, and with a beer, $5. Lunch, dinner, $5. Okay, so you don't have to cook. These are the things that these small restaurants cook for you in Spain. Weather is wonderful. People are very, very gracious. So that's a good country. Cyprus, I believe, has good weather because they're, if I'm not mistaken, they're in the Mediterranean Sea. So my cutoff here, as we're going through these countries, is $2,000 a month. I think if you're under $2,000 a month in per capita GDP, I don't think you're a rich country. But I think if you have a per capita GDP of at least $2,000 a month, then I think you're or more, right? You're kind of wealthy, if not wealthy or extremely wealthy, like Monaco. Okay, so my cutoff would probably be maybe, well, you know, the numbers, the figures vary a little bit, as you can see here, right? Probably Anguilla, which is in the Caribbean. There, that's probably I would cut off there. So we have about 50 rich or super rich countries. And then we get into these countries that are not rich or super rich, but they're pretty good, okay? Like Portugal. Portugal is not a rich country, I would say, but they have wonderful weather, wonderful cuisine, gracious people, but not rich. But it might be okay. That might be okay. Greece, per capita GDP is about maybe $19,000 a year, which is a little bit on the low side. But the weather is wonderful. The cuisine is delicious. The people are very gracious. But if you're working there, that's not so hot. Not terrible, but not so hot. Okay, and let's keep going. And I'm just going to posit the countries have good weather. Uruguay is too cold. Chile is kind of cold. Panama is hot and sticky. Costa Rica tends to be hot and sticky. Russia is, of course, very cold. So finally, we get here to the world average, which is about $11,000 per year. So that means that the average person on the planet is not making $1,000 a month, okay? Because to do a rough calculation, let's go to $11,000, okay? To kind of get I want to compare scenarios against the world average, which is about $11,000 a year. Okay, so the average person on the planet has access to about $11,000 of resources on an annual basis, roughly. Okay, but that's not what they're earning. So if we multiply it by, let's say, 0.75 to account for taxes, that means that the average person on the planet is earning about $8,000 a year, and we divide it by 12 months. That means that the average person on the planet is making about $600 or $700 a month. Okay, so that's not particularly good. Okay, especially considering that your average car expense in the United States is about $545 a month. So if you're making $687 a month and your average car payment is $545 a month, you cannot afford a car. You cannot afford a car. So most people on the planet, I think, cannot afford, certainly not a new car, but they probably cannot afford a car, period, right? Because you have the monthly payment, and you have the insurance, and you have gasoline, and you have maintenance, and oil changes, tires, battery, belts, hoses, blah, 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 okay? So if the average person in the world is making $687 a month, I think it would be fair to say that most people on the planet are poor or kind of poor or extremely poor. Okay, I think that would be fair to say. So going back to our idea of working in a rich country, I think that you probably don't want to, it would probably not be favorable to work in these mid-level countries, the countries that are above average, but only slightly above average. I would say the cutoff might be Anguilla, right there. if you go below Anguilla, say between Anguilla, which is number 49, and American Samoa, which is just barely above the world average, it will not go that well. I don't think you'll be happy to be making, you know, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year. I don't think it's gonna make you happy. It might, you know, but it would not. It's not the most favorable scenario, I don't think. Okay, and then once we get past the world average, then we get to countries that are where the per capita GDP is below the world average. Okay, and I'm only going to pause in the countries that I believe have good weather. I don't know every country in the world. Okay, so like Turkey is at around 9,000 a year. Some parts of Turkey have very good weather, okay, because they're off the Caribbean. Cuba is hot and sticky. Mexico, about 9,000 a year. Mexico has very good weather in most parts of the country. Okay. Argentina can have good weather, depending on where. They're at also around 9,000 a year, and so forth. Okay. Brazil is at around 7,000 a year. Brazil tends to be hot and sticky. So yeah, that's about it. Okay, because now you're getting into countries where the per capita GDP is very low. So if you were to work in one of these countries, you're probably not going to make too much money. Okay, so you probably don't want to work in the countries that where the per capita GDP is below the world average. Probably not. Okay. Because chances, if you're, you know, most people are average, about 2/3 of the people are average. So you will have an average performance, in most likely, okay. And so you'll be making, you know, 10,000 a year, 9,000 a year, or less. Okay. So that would not be favorable, I think. Okay. So that enough said about that. The good news is that you're in one of the richest countries in the world, and you're one of the richest regions in the world, which improves your probability of doing well. Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint. And okay, so next part of the slide asks, after retirement, which country do you think you could have the best life in and why? Okay, so now we have another URL to go to try to explore this, analyze or explore this idea. Okay, so every year, as you probably know, a lot of people are leaving California. I believe the figure is that every year, about 1 million people are exiting California. Other people are coming in, okay, and but other people are leaving California because mostly not because of the weather, okay, mostly because the cost of living is very high in California, as you probably know. Cost in California is quite high. We've had Toyota leave California, go to Texas, and more recently, Tesla has announced that they're leaving California and they're moving to Texas because the cost of living here is quite high. Okay, so that's kind of the situation. Now, we have quite a few Americans who are also leaving the United States because people like they leave California and they go to maybe Texas or Florida or something. And they get there and they realize, okay, well, we don't have enough money to have a good life here either. Okay. Like we're in Texas and we're like, oh, this is not too good. And they decide to leave the United States. And the country where most American expats are going to is actually Mexico. And then Costa Rica and then other countries. Okay, so the estimate is that right now there are somewhere between 1 and 3 million American expats living in Mexico. These are American citizens who have left the United States and they have no plan to come back. Okay, they permanently relocated to Mexico or Costa Rica or another country. And the reason for that is because the cost of living in most countries is much less than it is in the United States. So we know, so I'm going to use Mexico as our guidepost to see what this means. Okay, so we know that people in Mexico have a per capita GDP of about $9,000 per year. Okay, so that's the GDP in Mexico. But the question now is, what does that mean? If you have $9,000 a year cash money, right, to spend every year, what does that mean in Mexico? What does that translate to in Mexico in terms of standard of living, right? Because cost of living in most countries is less than here. Okay, for example, rents. Okay, the average rent in Orange County is about $2,200 a month, and a nice place in a nice area in Tijuana, which is the city closest to California, will run you between $350 to $500 a month. Okay, so basically 1/4 of what it costs you in Orange County. Nice place in a nice area in Tijuana. And Tijuana is one of the more expensive cities in Mexico. So meaning that by relocating, let's say from San Diego to Tijuana or from California to Tijuana, you can save about $1,500 every month in housing expense, right? And then you have $1,500 a month to do something else, right? To travel, to go to nice restaurants, whatever. Okay. So I'm going to use Mexico as our guidepost. So what does $9,000 a year translate to in terms of quality of life? Okay. So we'll go to another list. And this is the list of countries by gross domestic product in terms of purchasing power parity. Okay, so that means purchasing power parity means what will, say, $1,000 give you in standard of living in different countries. Okay, so because we know that the cost of living in most countries is a lot less than here. And we have, again, the same map, but the map changes somewhat, okay? Again, the richer countries tend to be in the north, and they tend to be like blue or dark green or green. And they tend to be in the north with the exception of Australia and New Zealand. And the poor countries tend to be in the south. But now, because we're looking at purchasing power parity, some of the countries that were not doing so well before, like Mexico and Chile and Argentina, are now looking better, okay, than in the previous map. We can go to the previous map. Let's do that. Let's see. Let's go to this map. Okay, we know that yellow is so-so, and orange is not too good. Okay, so here we have Mexico, which is orange, and Chile, which is yellow, and Argentina is orange, and there's another country here which I'm not sure what country it is yellow as examples in the nominal per capita GDP map. And then when we go to the purchasing power parity per capita GDP map, all of a sudden Mexico and Chile, Argentina, and a few other countries are now in the green. Okay, okay, so that means that with the same amount of dollars, you can have a better life in these countries that have all of a sudden turned green, okay, versus yellow or orange before. Okay, as example. Okay, so let's find out what this means for you. And we'll use Mexico as the guidepost. Okay, so we know that the per capita GDP in Mexico is about $9,000 a year, and that's the country where most Americans are retiring to if they're expats. And so $9,000 a year in Mexico is the equivalent of about $19,000 here. Okay, so $9,000 in California will get you nothing. Okay, you cannot survive $9,000 a year in California, but in Mexico, $9,000 is the equivalent of $19,000 here, which is roughly the life of a student. Let's do the math. Okay, $19,000 divided by 12 months, give you about $1,583. So that's roughly the budget of a student. Okay, so your $9,000, if you spend those, if you live in Mexico, you would be living, and here you'd be like almost home, you'd probably be homeless or almost homeless. In Mexico, you'd be living a life like a student, like our students, like that, which is not that bad. It's not great, it's not that bad. Okay, now we could look at the world average, which is I think useful. And let's look at that. Okay, let's look at the world average. Where's the world average? The world average was around 11,000. Oops, I went too far. 11,000. Okay, the world average is about 11,000. dollars, right? So what does that translate to in terms of purchasing power parity? So we go to the other graphic, and let's see what that means in terms of purchasing power parity. No, no, that's Europe. Okay, purchasing power parity should be here somewhere. Okay, so $11,000 on average in the world translates into about $17,000, almost double, not quite double. In the case of Mexico, it's double, but in the world, in terms of the world average, it's a little bit less than double. Okay, so this is why a lot of Americans are moving to Mexico or Costa Rica or other countries, right? Because with the same amount of dollars, they can more or less double their quality of life. Okay, that's a kind of strategy. Okay, so let's do a few more examples because I think this is very important for you. Okay, and I'm going to use the average California Social Security payment as a benchmark to see what is possible. Okay, so the average Social Security payment in California right now is $17.45 a month. Some people more, some people less. Times 12 months, it's about $20,000 a year, almost $21,000. Let's say $20,000 because that's a round figure. Okay, so if all you have is social, let's say you're in your 60s, 60 something, 66 or whatever, and or you could be younger, 60, you could be in your 60s. Okay, and you have a annual Social Security payout of $20,000 a year for the rest of your life. Okay, plus you get cost of living increases. Next year, the Social Security payments are going to go up almost 6% because you get these annual cost of living increases, more or less. Okay, so you have $20,000 to spend every year for the rest of your life, starting at age 62, for the next 20 years. You never bought a house, you never invested anything, you didn't buy stocks, bonds, nothing, but you did work. Okay, and you have this, you have the right to Social Security, and it's $20,000 a year just to spend. Okay, now in California, $1,745 a month before taxes is going to give you the life of a student. Okay, so that's kind of a poor life. It's not that great. Okay, because your housing, your utilities will be maybe $1,000, then you have $745. If you have a car, that's maybe $545. Now you're down to $200. Get rid of the car. You might not be able to afford a car with $745 a month. Okay, certainly not a nice car, probably. Okay, so that's not too good. You can survive in California, but that's about it. You'll be surviving. Okay, but what if you take those $20,000 a year and you relocate to another country? Okay, so we know that $20,000 a year in purchasing power parity in many countries is almost double. Okay, so $20,000 cash money in many countries is almost $40,000 a year, the equivalent of $40,000 a year here. Okay, so let's find the $40,000 a year country, okay, where you could relocate and have the equivalent of $40,000 a year here, even though it's only $20,000 cash money, right? So, and I'm only going to look at the countries that have good weather. Okay, well, the first one is clearly Slovenia. Okay, but I think Slovenia is pretty cold, or Lithuania. I think that's pretty cold too. Estonia is cold, and so I'm only going to look at the countries that have good weather. Puerto Rico, hot and sticky, and too many storms, I think. Okay, the first one that we run into is Portugal. Okay, so your $20,000 in your Social Security would be the equivalent of, let's say, $35,000 here for the rest of your life without working. Okay, you could probably find a job in Portugal teaching English or doing something right on the side, but it would be like if you're making almost $3,000 a month here, right? You only have $20,000 from your Social Security. You relocate to Portugal. It's like if you were spending $3,000, almost $3,000 every month here, which is a good life. $3,000 a month in California is quite good. Okay, so there is. Okay, Portugal is a good choice. Let's see. I thought we had more. Spain. Yeah, I think the first one was Spain. Spain would work because Spain has good weather, or Cyprus would work. Okay. The $40,000 a year in Spain might be like spending $38,000 a year here, roughly. Well, Spain, you might come a little bit short. You might be a little bit below the average lifestyle in Spain, but I think Spain will work. Cyprus will work. Cyprus, I believe, has good weather. We talked about Portugal. I'm only going to pause on the countries that have good weather. Okay, Turkey. Some parts of Turkey have very good weather. Okay, so you only have $20,000 a year to spend, but the per capita GDP in Turkey, in terms of purchasing power parity, is around 30. Okay, so your $20,000 a year will get you roughly, well, will get you about $40,000, right? But people in Turkey are making about 30 and you have 40, the equivalent of 40 here. And they have the equivalent of 30. So they'll give you a better than average lifestyle in Turkey. Same with Greece. The purchasing power parity GDP in Greece is about 29, but you have roughly 40. So your quality of life in Turkey will be substantially better than the average person in Greece or Turkey. Okay, like that. And we can keep going down the list, focusing on the countries that have good weather. By good weather, I mean that it's not cold, okay? And it's not hot and sticky. And we get to Mexico, which is a country where most American pets are retiring to. And the purchasing power parity GDP in Mexico is about 19,000 a year, probably around there, but you have 40, right? So that means that your $20,000 cash money in Mexico will give you basically double, double the quality of life of the average Mexican. Double. Okay. What does that mean, double? That means that if they have one bedroom, you have two bedrooms. If they have two bedrooms, you have four bedrooms. If they have one car, you have two cars. Like that. That's what that means. Okay. Like that. And so forth. Let's see. So there is, we probably, it's 11:30. We better go back to our apartment. So this is the kind of strategy that you might want to consider for your retirement, okay? Depending on your results. You know, of course, if you retire very wealthy, you can sing it. You can go wherever you want, okay? Kobe Bryant retired a multi-millionaire. I think he retired with a net worth of 500 million. So with 500 million, you can retire in Monaco, no problem.